Derek Sullivan popped champagne on the courthouse steps, waving divorce papers like a victory flag. He had crushed his waitress wife, taken everything, left her with nothing but a pile of debt and a rusted warehouse. He didn't see Caroline watching from across the street. He didn't know the worthless company he'd just signed over controlled every shipping contract his corporation depended on. The waitress wasn't just serving coffee. She was about to serve justice. If you want to see how this satisfying revenge unfolds, subscribe now and follow this story to the very end. Comment your city below. I want to see how far this tale travels. Caroline Hayes wiped ketchup off table 4. Her back ached. Her feet burned. 8 hours into a double shift, and she still had 2 more to go. The lunch rush at Rosie's Bakery hit hard every day, but Thursdays were brutal. She tucked a strand of brown hair behind her ear and grabbed the coffee pot. Table 7 needed a refill. Table 3 wanted more butter. The couple by the window complained their eggs were cold. Caroline handled it all with a tired smile. "You're too good for this place," Martha O'Brien said from behind the counter. The bakery owner was 62, gray-haired and sharp as a butcher knife. She'd known Caroline for 3 years now. "It's honest work," Caroline said. "Honest work don't explain why a girl smart as you is still pouring coffee at 32. Caroline didn't answer. She never did when Martha pushed. The bell above the door chimed. Caroline felt the air change before she even turned around. Conversation stopped. Forks paused mid-bite. Even the kitchen went quiet. She knew who it was without looking. Derek Sullivan walked through the door like he owned the building. Probably because, in his mind, he owned everything. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than Caroline made in 6 months. His dark hair was slicked back, showing the first signs of thinning he refused to acknowledge. Behind him walked Madison Pierce, 26 years old, blonde hair cascading over a white fur coat despite the mild April weather. Madison's engagement ring caught the fluorescent lights. It was the size of a small grape. "Table for 2, Derek announced. Not to the hostess, to the room. His eyes scanned until they found Caroline. A smile spread across his face. "Actually, we'll take that one." He pointed directly at the table Caroline was cleaning. Caroline's grip tightened on the coffee pot. "Derek," she said quietly, "please, not here." "Why not here?" He pulled out a chair for Madison. "This is where you belong, isn't it? Among the grease and the common folk?" Madison giggled, covering her perfect mouth with a manicured hand. "Oh, Derek, don't be cruel. She's working." "I am working," Caroline said. Her voice stayed level, but her knuckles went white around the pot handle. "What do you want?" Derek reached into his suit jacket. The room held its breath. He pulled out a thick manila envelope and dropped it onto the table. It landed right in the middle of a puddle of spilled syrup Caroline hadn't finished wiping. "Happy anniversary, darling." Caroline stared at the envelope. Syrup seeped into the edges, staining the paper brown. She knew what it was. She'd known this moment was coming ever since Derek got promoted to vice president at Cornerstone Properties. Money had changed him. Or maybe money had just revealed what was always there. "Divorce papers," Caroline said flatly. "Expedited." Derek's grin widened. "I want this done fast. Madison and I have a wedding to plan in the Hamptons. Can't have baggage dragging me down." "Baggage." Caroline's voice dropped low. 7 years of marriage, and I'm baggage. 7 years of you holding me back. Derek leaned forward. "Look at yourself, Caroline. You're a waitress. You smell like maple syrup and failure. I'm a shark now. I need a partner who can swim in the deep end." Madison leaned over, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "It's for the best, hun." Derek needs someone who can keep up with his lifestyle. You understand, right? Caroline looked at Madison, then at Derek. Something shifted in her eyes. The fear faded. The hurt receded. What remained was cold, calculating. "You want a divorce?" Caroline asked quietly. "Fine." Derek blinked. He'd expected tears, begging, not acceptance. "And there's one more thing," he recovered quickly, pulling another document from his jacket. "The prenup situation, or rather, the lack of one." "I remember," Caroline said. "You refused to sign one." "Because I was broke when we got married," Derek laughed. "But now my lawyers have determined that since I brought in 90% of the assets, you get nothing. I keep the condo, the investments, the cars. You get whatever's in your checking account." "You're kicking me out of our home?" "My home," Derek corrected. "But hey, maybe Rosie has a cot in the back. You can sleep between the flour sacks." The bakery erupted in murmurs. A truck driver at the counter muttered, "That's stone cold." Caroline picked up the syrup-stained envelope. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply wiped the sticky residue off with her apron. "You want everything, Derek?" "Everything I'm entitled to." "Then make sure you read the fine print." She tucked the envelope into her apron pocket. "All of it." Derek laughed. "I wrote the fine print. My lawyers charge $1,000 an hour." He threw a $100 bill on the table. It landed in the syrup puddle. "Keep the change. Buy yourself a new apron." He stood, guiding Madison toward the door. "Oh, and Caroline? Don't bother showing up to the hearing. Save yourself the embarrassment." The door swung shut behind them. Silence filled the bakery. Martha rushed over, her face tight with fury. "Honey, go to the back. Take the rest of the day. That man is a monster." Caroline shook her head slowly. A small smile touched her lips. It didn't reach her eyes. "No, Martha. I'm going to finish my shift." "Caroline!" "I need the money." Caroline turned toward the kitchen. Lawyers are expensive. But she didn't need the money. As she walked past the counter, her mind was already calculating liquidity across 6 different offshore accounts: the Caymans, Switzerland, Singapore. Derek thought he was divorcing a waitress. He'd forgotten that before she took his name, Caroline's last name wasn't Hayes. It was Whitmore. As in Theodore Whitmore. As in Whitmore Maritime Holdings. As in the family that quietly controlled 40% of all shipping logistics on the eastern seaboard. She'd changed her name to escape it, to find someone who loved her, not her family's billions. She'd found Derek instead, and now she'd found the truth about him. 3 weeks later, the Manhattan family courthouse felt like a refrigerator. Caroline sat alone on the left side of the aisle. She wore a gray dress from a thrift store, held a plastic cup of water. No jewelry, no makeup. Beside her sat Harold Pemberton. He was 68, stooped, with thick glasses and a rumpled suit that looked like it came from the 1970s. He shuffled papers slowly, occasionally squinting at them, like he couldn't quite read the text. To anyone watching, he looked like a mall lawyer who'd wandered in from a debt consolidation clinic. On the right side, Derek sat surrounded by his legal team. 3 attorneys from Sterling and Associates, navy suits, matching laptops, chrome briefcases. They moved with the coordinated precision of a military unit. Derek leaned toward his lead attorney, Victor Crane. "Look at her. She hired a nursing home refugee. This'll be over by lunch." Victor smirked. "We'll crush her, Mr. Sullivan. Judge Morrison hates alimony freeloaders." Judge Patricia Morrison entered the room. Stern, impatient, famous for quick decisions. "In the matter of Sullivan versus Sullivan, let's proceed." Victor rose, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor, My client, Derek Sullivan, is a high-ranking executive at Cornerstone Properties. He has single-handedly built his fortune over the past 6 years. The respondent, Mrs. Sullivan, has been employed as a service industry worker with negligible income. We argue she contributed nothing to the accumulation of assets and deserves no alimony or property claims. Judge Morrison looked over her spectacles at Caroline. Does the respondent have a counter-argument? Harold Pemberton stood slowly. His knees popped audibly. He adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat 3 times before speaking. Your Honor, his voice wavered like a reed in wind. My client merely wishes for a fair separation. She is willing to waive her right to the penthouse and all luxury vehicles. Derek pumped his fist under the table. However, Harold continued, she requests full ownership of a single joint asset that Mr. Sullivan purchased 4 years ago as an investment. Derek frowned. He leaned toward Victor. What's he talking about? Victor flipped through documents. What investment? Some shell company, Derek whispered. North Wind Logistics. I bought it for pennies. It's a warehouse full of rusted trucks. I only kept it as a tax write-off. It's worthless. Victor nodded and stood. Your Honor, the respondent is requesting North Wind Logistics LLC. We have no objection. If she wants a failing company drowning in debt, she can have it. Harold coughed. Is that agreeable, Your Honor? Judge Morrison raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Sullivan, you're aware you're accepting a liability? This company has significant outstanding debts. Caroline looked up. Her eyes were clear, focused, a sharp contrast to her slumped posture. I understand, Your Honor. It has sentimental value. Derek snorted loudly. Sentimental value? It's a warehouse full of junk. Let her have it. I don't want to pay the property taxes anyway. Order, Judge Morrison warned. She made a note. Very well. The divorce is granted. Mr. Sullivan retains the penthouse, stock portfolio, and all liquid assets. Mrs. Sullivan retains ownership of Northwind Logistics and waives all rights to alimony. Is this agreed? Agreed, Derek said quickly. He signed before Victor could even review the margins. Agreed, Caroline said softly. The gavel banged. Done. Derek stood and walked over to Caroline. He looked down at her with a mixture of pity and contempt. You know, I almost feel bad for you. You walked away with nothing but debt. But hey, maybe you can sleep in one of those broken-down trucks when you can't make rent. Caroline rose slowly. She met his eyes without flinching. Good luck with the wedding, Derek. I hear they're expensive. Pocket change for me, he winked. Goodbye, Caroline. Enjoy serving eggs for the rest of your life. He strutted out, high-fiving his lawyers in the hallway. Their laughter echoed off the marble walls. Caroline waited until they were gone. Then she turned to Harold Pemberton. The old man's demeanor transformed instantly. His spine straightened. He removed his thick glasses, revealing eyes sharp as surgical steel. His voice, when he spoke, held no tremor. Did we get it? Complete transfer, Harold confirmed. He signed over Northwind Logistics without reading a single clause. Good. Caroline reached into her thrift store purse and pulled out a phone. Not the cracked Android she used in front of Derek. A military-grade encrypted satellite device. She pressed a single button. Nathan, it's done. Initiate Phase 2. A man's voice responded. Calm. Professional. Understood. The board of Whitmore Holdings has been notified. Your seat is waiting. Caroline ended the call. Harold held the door for her. Mr. Sullivan believes Northwind is a failing logistics company. It was. Caroline stepped into the sunlight. Until I restructured it 3 months ago. He didn't notice because he never looked past the tax benefits. And what did you restructure? The contracts. Caroline's smile was ice. Northwind holds exclusive shipping rights for the entire Cornerstone Properties supply chain. Every building material, every fixture, every piece of furniture for their developments has to go through Northwind. Harold's eyes widened. So when their next project launches, they can't move a single brick without my permission. Caroline slid on a pair of sunglasses. Derek just signed over the keys to his own kingdom. She walked toward a waiting black town car. And Harold, schedule a meeting with Cornerstone's CEO for next week. Tell him the new owner of Northwind Logistics wants to discuss rate adjustments. Harold chuckled. He's going to need a very strong drink. He's going to need a miracle. Caroline opened the car door. But miracles are expensive, and I'm about to raise the price. The door closed. The car pulled away. And somewhere across the city, Derek Sullivan was already spending money he would never have. The black town car had barely pulled away from the courthouse when Derek's phone started ringing. He ignored it. He was too busy laughing with Madison in the back of his silver Porsche, champagne spilling onto the leather seats. "Did you see her face?" Madison squealed. "She looked like a kicked puppy." 7 years of dead weight gone. Derek clinked his glass against hers. Now we can finally live the life we deserve. His phone rang again. Then again. Then a fourth time. "Answer it," Madison pouted. "It's ruining the mood." Derek glanced at the screen. Victor Crane, his lead attorney. "Victor, this better be good. I'm celebrating." "Derek, we have a problem." "Problem? I just won everything. There are no problems." "The logistics contract for the Meridian Tower project. It's been flagged." Derek's smile faltered. Meridian Tower was Cornerstone's flagship development. 42 floors of luxury condominiums. $200 million in pre-sales. The biggest project of his career. Flagged how? The shipping company, Northwind Logistics. They've frozen all pending orders. Something about a compliance audit. Derek's blood turned cold. Northwind. The worthless shell company he'd just signed over to Caroline. "That's impossible," he breathed. "She just got the company an hour ago. She can't even access the systems yet." "Derek, I'm looking at the contract right now. Northwind has exclusive shipping rights for all Cornerstone developments on the eastern seaboard. If they don't release the materials, we can't build. If we can't build, we miss our deadline. If we miss our deadline, we lose the investors." Derek's voice cracked. "We lose everything. Call her. Fix this. Now." The line went dead. Madison stared at him. "Derek, you look sick." He didn't answer. He was already dialing Caroline's number. It went straight to voicemail. "You have reached the private line of C. Whitmore. Leave a message." Whitmore. Not Sullivan. Not Hayes. Whitmore. Derek's hands started shaking. He dialed again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. "Derek, what's happening?" Madison's voice rose with panic. "You're scaring me." "Shut up." He pressed his forehead against the cold window. "Just shut up. I need to think." He didn't sleep that night. By morning, he'd left 17 voicemails, sent 42 emails, called every number he could find associated with Northwind Logistics. Nothing. At 7 a.m., he drove to the Northwind warehouse in New Jersey. He expected to find a derelict lot with rusted trucks and a leaking roof. Instead, he found a fortress. The old chain-link fence had been replaced with 10-foot steel barriers topped with razor wire. Security guards in tactical gear manned the entrance. Behind them, construction crews swarmed over the property, and a fleet of brand-new black semi-trucks lined up in perfect formation. Derek pulled up to the gate and rolled down his window. "Open up! I'm here to see the owner." The guard didn't blink. "Do you have an appointment?" "I don't need an appointment. I'm Derek Sullivan, Vice President of Cornerstone Properties, your biggest client, and the owner is my ex-wife." The guard pressed his earpiece, waited, looked back at Derek. "Access denied. You're not on the approved visitor list." "You can't do this. I'll sue you. I'll have this whole place shut down." "Sir, if you don't vacate the entrance in 30 seconds, we will engage security protocols." Derek's face turned purple. He slammed his palm against the steering wheel and reversed out, tires screaming against the asphalt. He parked across the street and watched. For 2 hours he sat there. He saw executives in suits nicer than his walking the grounds with tablets. He saw black sedans coming and going. He saw workers moving with military precision. This wasn't a failing company. This was an empire. His phone rang. The number made his stomach drop. Richard Blackwell, CEO of Cornerstone Properties, a man known for destroying careers before breakfast. "Mr. Blackwell, sir, I'm handling the situation personally." "Handling it?" Blackwell's voice was ice. "I just got a call from our Shanghai supplier. They can't ship because Northwind won't approve the transit documentation." "Do you know what that means, Derek?" "I'm working on it. It means 400 workers sitting idle. It means investors asking questions. It means my phone ringing off the hook, with people wanting to know why our vice president's ex-wife is holding our entire operation hostage." Derek's throat tightened. "I can fix this. You have 48 hours. If those materials aren't moving by Friday morning, you're done. And Derek, if this company goes down because of your messy divorce, I will personally ensure you never work in this industry again. You'll be lucky to get a job parking cars." The line went dead. Derek drove back to the city in a daze. He went straight to his penthouse, needing the comfort of his expensive furniture and million-dollar views. Madison was waiting in the living room, surrounded by suitcases. "What are you doing?" "Packing." She didn't look up. "My friend Sarah called. She said you got demoted, or fired, or something." "I didn't get fired. It's a temporary setback." "She said your ex-wife owns some company that's destroying you." Madison finally met his eyes.
Is that true?
"It's complicated."
Is it true, Derek?
He couldn't answer. Madison zipped her last suitcase.
I'm 26 years old. I'm not going to waste my prime years on a man whose ex-wife is more powerful than he is.
"Madison, please. I love you."
You loved what I looked like on your arm.
She grabbed her bags.
And I loved what your credit card looked like in my wallet. Let's not pretend this was ever anything more.
"Where will you go?"
Sarah's brother just made partner at Goldman Sachs. He's single.
She walked toward the door.
Goodbye, Derek. Good luck with your waitress problem.
The door slammed behind her. Derek stood alone in the penthouse. The penthouse he'd taken from Caroline. The penthouse that suddenly felt like a tomb. He walked to the liquor cabinet and poured himself a scotch. Then another. Then a third. By midnight, the bottle was empty, and Derek had a plan. If Caroline wanted to play games, he would play games. He still had access to Cornerstone's internal servers. He knew the schematics for every development project. He knew the supplier lists, the investor contacts, the proprietary designs. Vanguard Development, Cornerstone's biggest rival, would pay millions for that information. He opened his laptop and logged into the company system. Access granted. He smiled. They hadn't revoked his credentials yet. He began downloading files. Blueprints, financial projections, client lists, everything he could grab. A message popped up on his screen. Cipher. Do you have the Meridian Tower specifications? Derek typed back. Everything, full package, ready for transfer. Cipher. Price? Derek. 5 million, Swiss account, tonight. Cipher. Done. Send the files to the secure server. Payment upon receipt. Derek's heart raced. 5 million wouldn't make him a billionaire, but it would get him out of the country. Brazil, Thailand, somewhere without extradition treaties. Somewhere he could rebuild. He initiated the upload. The progress bar crept forward. 10%. 20%. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Check your email. Now. Derek opened his inbox. One new message. From C. Whitmore. Subject. Checkmate. His blood ran cold. He clicked it open. Dear Derek, did you really think we weren't watching? The server you're uploading to isn't Vanguard Development. It's a honeypot operated by the FBI Cybercrimes Division. Cipher is Special Agent Marcus Webb. He's been building a case against corporate espionage for 3 years. You just handed him everything he needed. The federal marshals should be arriving at your penthouse in approximately 4 minutes. I'd use that time wisely. Regards, Caroline Whitmore, CEO, Whitmore Maritime Holdings. Derek stared at the screen. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. He tried to cancel the upload. The system locked him out. He tried to delete the files. Access denied. He tried to shut down the laptop. The screen froze on one image, the upload completing at 100%. A knock on the door. Loud. Authoritative. FBI, open up! Derek didn't move. Another knock. Louder. Derek Sullivan, we have a warrant for your arrest. Open the door now, or we will break it down. He looked around his penthouse. The marble floors, the crystal chandeliers, the artwork he'd bought to impress clients who never came. This was supposed to be his kingdom. Now, it was his prison. The door burst open. Agents flooded in, weapons drawn. Derek found himself on the ground, hands cuffed behind his back, cheek pressed against the cold marble. Derek Sullivan, you're under arrest for corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, and attempted wire fraud. You have the right to remain silent. They hauled him to his feet. Through the window, far below on the street, a black town car sat idling. Derek couldn't see inside, but he knew she was there, watching. The woman he'd called worthless. The waitress he'd humiliated in front of a crowded bakery. The wife he'd thrown away like garbage. She'd destroyed him without ever raising her voice. And the worst part? He'd handed her every weapon she needed. The next morning, Caroline walked into the Cornerstone Properties boardroom. She wore a white power suit. Her hair was styled in a sleek professional cut. Around her neck hung a sapphire pendant that had belonged to her mother. Richard Blackwell sat at the head of the table, looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. Ms. Whitmore, thank you for coming. Thank you for the invitation. She took a seat across from him. Though I suspect this isn't a social call. Blackwell cleared his throat. I assume you've heard about Derek's arrest. I read about it this morning. Tragic. You don't seem surprised. Nothing surprises me anymore, Mr. Blackwell. Caroline folded her hands on the table. But I didn't come here to discuss my ex-husband. I came to discuss our business relationship. Blackwell shifted uncomfortably. The shipping contracts. Specifically, the exclusivity clause that gives Northwind Logistics sole authority over all Cornerstone shipments on the eastern seaboard. That contract was signed years ago, under very different circumstances. Contracts don't care about circumstances, Mr. Blackwell. They care about signatures, and your signature is right there at the bottom. Blackwell's jaw tightened. What do you want? Caroline smiled. I want to help. Help? Cornerstone is in crisis. Your vice president just got arrested for espionage. Your flagship project is stalled. Your investors are panicking. You need stability. You need someone who can make problems disappear. And you're offering that? I'm offering a partnership. Caroline slid a document across the table. Whitmore Maritime Holdings acquires a 30% stake in Cornerstone Properties. In exchange, I release the shipping hold immediately and guarantee priority service for all future projects. Blackwell stared at the document. 30%? That would make you the largest individual shareholder. It would also make me your greatest ally. Caroline leaned forward. Or your greatest enemy. The choice is yours. Blackwell picked up a pen. His hand trembled slightly. How long do I have to decide? Caroline checked her watch. The Meridian Tower materials are currently sitting in a warehouse in Taiwan. If they're not on a ship by tomorrow morning, you'll miss your construction window. So I'd say you have about 12 hours. She stood and walked toward the door. Ms. Whitmore. She paused. Blackwell's voice was quiet, defeated. Did Derek ever know? About who you really were? Caroline considered the question. He never asked. She opened the door. He never thought to look past the apron. She left him sitting alone with his pen and his choices. By the end of the day, the document was signed. 12 hours later, ships loaded with building materials departed from Taiwan, and Caroline Whitmore, the waitress from Rosie's Bakery, became the most powerful woman in New York real estate. But she wasn't finished yet. There was still one more loose end to tie up. One more person who needed to learn what happened when you underestimated Caroline Whitmore. Madison Pierce was about to have a very bad week. Madison Pierce had always believed in her own luck. 3 days after leaving Derek's penthouse, she'd already moved into a suite at the Plaza Hotel, courtesy of Bradley Harrison, Sarah's brother from Goldman Sachs. He was 42, balding, and laughed too loud at his own jokes. But his black card had no limit. Order whatever you want, baby, Bradley said over breakfast. Money's not an issue. Madison smiled her sweetest smile and ordered the lobster eggs Benedict. Life was good. Life was always good when you looked like Madison Pierce. Her phone buzzed. An email from her agent. Subject: Urgent. Your contract. Madison frowned and opened it. Madison, we regret to inform you that Lux Cosmetics has terminated your influencer partnership, effective immediately. Additionally, Bella Vista magazine has withdrawn their cover feature offer. We have reached out to your other brand partners. All have declined to comment. We recommend you contact us at your earliest convenience. Madison's stomach dropped. She dialed her agent immediately. Rebecca, what the hell is going on? Madison, Rebecca's voice was tight. I've been trying to reach you all morning. I just saw the email. What happened with Lux? They received a legal notice, something about due diligence concerns regarding your personal associations. My personal associations? What does that even mean? It means someone with very expensive lawyers is making phone calls. Every brand I've contacted today has suddenly gone cold. It's like you've been blacklisted overnight. Madison's hand trembled. Who would do that? I don't know, but whoever it is has enough influence to make Vogue Paris return my calls with a no comment. That doesn't just happen, Madison. Bradley looked up from his eggs. Everything okay, babe? Madison forced a smile. Fine. Business stuff. She hung up and stared at her phone. This couldn't be happening. She was Madison Pierce. She had 200,000 Instagram followers. She'd been featured in Harper's Bazaar. Her phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. Enjoying breakfast at the plaza? The lobster is excellent this time of year. Madison's blood froze. She looked around the restaurant. Businessmen reading newspapers. Tourists taking photos. A woman in the corner drinking coffee alone. The woman looked up. Madison recognized her immediately. Caroline. She wasn't wearing a waitress uniform anymore. She wore a cream-colored blazer that probably cost more than Madison's entire wardrobe. Her hair was perfect. Her posture was regal. She smiled at Madison and raised her coffee cup in a mock toast. Then she stood, left a bill on the table, and walked out without a backward glance. Madison couldn't breathe. "Madison?" Bradley touched her arm. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I need to go." She pushed back from the table. "I'll call you later." She rushed out of the restaurant, heels clicking frantically against the marble floor. She burst through the plaza's front doors and looked up and down Fifth Avenue. Caroline was gone. But on the sidewalk, right where Madison was standing, lay a single business card. She picked it up. Caroline Whitmore, CEO, Whitmore Maritime Holdings. Some debts can't be paid with money. Madison crumpled the card in her fist. She wasn't going to be intimidated by some waitress playing dress-up. She pulled out her phone and called the one person who might still help her. Victor Crane answered on the third ring. "Madison, I can't represent you. Conflict of interest." "I'm not asking for representation. I'm asking for information. Who is Caroline Whitmore?" Silence. "Victor, tell me." "You don't want to know." "Tell me." Victor sighed heavily. "Theodore Whitmore. Ever heard of him?" "No." He built Whitmore Maritime Holdings from nothing. At his peak, he controlled 40% of all shipping logistics on the eastern seaboard. Real estate, transportation, international trade. When he died 10 years ago, his fortune was estimated at $8 billion. Madison's knees went weak. He had one daughter, Caroline. She disappeared from public life after his death, changed her name, lived anonymously. And she married Derek. Derek thought he married a waitress. Victor laughed bitterly. He married one of the richest women in America. Madison leaned against a lamppost for support. Why? Why would someone with $8 billion work at a bakery? Maybe she wanted to find out if anyone would love her for herself. Maybe she was testing people. Victor paused. Derek failed the test. And Madison? I think you failed it too. The line went dead. Madison stood on Fifth Avenue, surrounded by thousands of people, and felt completely alone. That night, Bradley took her to dinner at Les Bernardins. Halfway through the appetizer course, his phone rang. "I need to take this." He stepped away from the table. Madison watched him through the restaurant window, pacing on the sidewalk, his face growing redder by the second. When he came back, he wouldn't meet her eyes. "Bradley? What's wrong?" "That was my managing director." His voice was strange, hollow. "There's been a compliance review. Something about my client accounts." "What does that have to do with me?" "Nothing. Everything." He rubbed his face. "They're asking questions about my personal associations, about who I'm dating, about potential conflicts of interest." Madison's stomach clenched. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I can't see you anymore." "What?" "I'm sorry, Madison. I really am. But I'm up for partner next year. I can't have anything in my background that raises red flags." "I'm a red flag?" "Someone is making you one." Bradley stood and dropped cash on the table. "I don't know who you pissed off, but they're serious. My advice? Find out what they want and give it to them." He walked out. Madison sat alone at the table, her lobster bisque growing cold. The waiter approached nervously. "Ma'am, will your companion be returning?" Madison looked at the empty chair across from her, then at the bill Bradley had left behind. It wasn't enough to cover the meal. She pulled out her credit card. The waiter came back 2 minutes later. "I'm sorry, ma'am. This card has been declined." Madison tried another card. Declined. Another. Declined. Her face burned with humiliation as other diners began to stare. She emptied her wallet onto the table, scraped together every bill she had. It was just barely enough. She walked out of Le Bernardin into the cold night air, broke, alone, and terrified. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. Feels different on this side, doesn't it? Madison hurled her phone into the nearest trash can. Across the city, in a federal detention center, Derek Sullivan was having the worst week of his life. His lawyer, a public defender named Thomas Reeves, sat across from him with a file thick enough to be a weapon. "The charges are serious, Derek. Corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, wire fraud. If convicted, you're looking at 15 to 20 years. Derek's orange jumpsuit hung loose on his frame. He'd lost 10 pounds in a week. There has to be a way out. There might be. Reeves flipped through pages. The FBI is willing to discuss a plea deal, 5 years instead of 20. But there's a condition. Anything. You testify against your contacts at Vanguard Development. Names, dates, everything you know about their corporate espionage network. Derek's mouth went dry. Those people will kill me. Then you take your chances at trial. Reeves shrugged. Your choice. Derek stared at the ceiling. 2 weeks ago, he'd been a vice president with a penthouse and a beautiful fiancée. Now he was choosing between prison and betraying dangerous criminals. There's something else, Reeves said carefully. Someone's been paying attention to your case, making calls. Caroline? I can't confirm that, but whoever it is, they're very interested in making sure you don't get the plea deal. She's trying to bury me. Or she's trying to make sure you face real consequences. Reeves gathered his files. I'll give you until tomorrow to decide. But Derek, if I were you, I'd think very carefully about who you're willing to cross. After Reeves left, Derek sat alone in his cell. He thought about Carolyn, the quiet girl who used to make his coffee exactly the way he liked it, who ironed his shirts every morning, who never complained when he came home late. He'd thought she was weak. He'd thought she was nothing. He'd been so wrong. 1 month later, the Metropolitan Charity Gala was the event of the season. Madison Pierce stood outside the venue, wearing a rented dress and borrowed jewelry. She'd talked her way onto the guest list through a former roommate who worked in event planning. This was her last chance. Her last opportunity to network, to find someone who could rescue her from the financial and social destruction that had consumed her life. She walked through the doors and immediately felt out of place. The women here wore gowns that cost more than cars. The men wore watches that could pay off mortgages. Madison grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and tried to look confident. Then the orchestra stopped. The room fell silent. Madison turned toward the entrance. Caroline Whitmore descended the grand staircase, wearing a midnight blue silk gown that flowed like water. Around her neck hung the St. James Star, a sapphire necklace that had been missing from public view for 20 years. She looked like a queen. Next to her walked the mayor of New York. Madison's champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. Everyone turned to look at her. The sound echoed through the silent ballroom. Caroline's eyes found Madison's. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply acknowledged her with a slight nod, as if recognizing a servant who had spilled something. Then she continued her descent, greeting senators and CEOs and celebrities, as if they were old friends. Something snapped in Madison. She pushed through the crowd, ignoring the whispers and stares. She reached the bottom of the staircase just as Caroline stepped off. "You," Madison's voice rang out across the silent room. "You did this to me." Caroline stopped. She turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" "Don't play games with me. You destroyed my career. You turned everyone against me. You ruined my life." "I did nothing of the sort." Caroline's voice was calm, pleasant even. "I simply allowed people to see who you really are." "I never did anything to you." "You helped destroy my marriage." Caroline stepped closer, her voice dropping so only Madison could hear. "You laughed while my husband humiliated me in front of a room full of strangers. You called me a kicked puppy." Madison's face went pale. "I didn't mean—" "You meant every word," Caroline straightened. "And now you're learning what it feels like to be powerless, to have everyone look at you with contempt, to be treated like you're worthless." "Please," Madison's voice cracked. "I have nothing. No money, no job, no friends. I'll apologize. I'll do anything." Caroline studied her for a long moment. "Anything?" "Anything." "Then here's what you're going to do." Caroline's voice was ice. "You're going to walk out of this gala. You're going to go home. And tomorrow morning, you're going to apply for a job at a bakery I know. It's called Rosie's. They're hiring." Madison stared at her in disbelief. "You want me to be a waitress?" "I want you to learn what honest work feels like." Caroline smiled coldly. "You'll start at minimum wage, just like I did. You'll refill coffee cups and wipe down tables and have people look at you like you're nothing. And maybe, if you're very lucky, you'll discover what I discovered." "What's that?" "That your worth isn't determined by who you're dating or what you're wearing. It's determined by who you are when you have nothing." Caroline gestured toward the door. "Security will escort you out now." Two men in suits appeared at Madison's elbows. "You can't do this," Madison hissed. "These people will hear about how you treated me." "These people?" Caroline laughed softly. "Look around you. Bankers, investors, politicians. They all depend on Whitmore Holdings for something. Do you really think any of them will risk their relationship with me to defend a woman they've never heard of?" Madison looked around. Every face was turned away. Every back was to her. She was invisible. "Goodbye, Madison." Caroline turned back to her guests. "I hope you find what you're looking for. It won't be here." The security guards led Madison out through a service entrance. The door closed behind her with a soft click. She stood in the alley behind the gala, wearing a rented dress and borrowed jewelry, with nothing in her wallet and nowhere to go. For the first time in her life, Madison Pierce understood what it meant to be truly alone. Inside the ballroom, Caroline accepted a glass of champagne from a waiter. Nathan Cross appeared at her side. "That was intense." "It was necessary." "Do you think she'll actually apply to Rosie's?" "No." Caroline watched the dancers swirl across the floor. "But she'll remember this moment for the rest of her life. Every time she looks down on someone, she'll remember how it felt to be looked down upon." "And Derek?" "His trial starts next month. The prosecutor is pushing for maximum sentencing." "Because of the evidence we provided?" "Because of the choices he made." Caroline set down her champagne. "We didn't destroy him, Nathan. We just made sure he faced consequences for his own actions." Nathan nodded slowly. "What happens now?" Caroline looked out over the ballroom. The wealthiest, most powerful people in New York, all gathered in one place. Many of them had once ignored her. Some had actively mocked her. Now they competed for her attention. "Now," she said quietly, "we build something real." The orchestra struck up a new song. Caroline walked onto the dance floor, alone.
She didn't need a partner. She never had. And somewhere in a prison cell, Derek Sullivan was finally beginning to understand the magnitude of his mistake. He'd thrown away a diamond because he thought it was glass. Now the glass had shattered, and the diamond was shining brighter than ever. 6 months passed like water through open fingers. Derek Sullivan had grown used to the orange jumpsuit. He'd grown used to the metal toilet, the concrete walls, the 30 minutes of sunlight they allowed him in the yard. What he couldn't grow used to was the silence. No one called, no one wrote, no one came. His mother had stopped answering after the 3rd month. His former colleagues at Cornerstone had erased him from every record. Even Victor Crane, the lawyer he'd paid hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years, had sent back his letters unopened. Derek Sullivan, once the vice president who commanded a corner office with views of Central Park, now spent his days mopping floors and counting ceiling tiles. The trial had been brutal. The prosecution presented evidence Derek didn't even know existed. Emails he'd deleted, phone calls he thought were private, financial records buried in offshore accounts he'd forgotten about. Everything traced back to Northwind Logistics. Everything traced back to Caroline. His public defender, Thomas Reeves, had tried his best. But when the FBI played recordings of Derek negotiating with Cypher, the jury's decision was inevitable. Guilty on all counts. 8 years federal prison. No possibility of parole for 5. The judge had called him a cautionary tale of unchecked arrogance. The newspapers had called him worse. Now Derek sat in the visitation room, waiting for a meeting he'd never expected. The door opened. Harold Pemberton walked in. Derek's stomach turned. The old lawyer looked exactly as he had in the courtroom. Rumpled suit, thick glasses, shuffling gait. But Derek knew better now. He'd learned who Harold really was. Senior partner at one of the most powerful law firms on the East Coast. A man who'd represented Fortune 500 CEOs and defended corporations against federal investigations. A man who'd played Derek like a fiddle. "Mr. Sullivan," Harold sat down across from him. "You look well. What do you want?" "I'm here to deliver a message." Harold pulled a document from his briefcase. "From my client, Caroline." "Ms. Whitmore," Harold corrected him gently. "She prefers her family name now." "Is she here to gloat? To watch me suffer?" "Quite the opposite, actually." Harold slid the document across the table. "She's offering you a choice." Derek stared at the paper. What kind of choice? The prosecution's case was built largely on evidence provided by Whitmore Holdings. Without that evidence, your conviction could be appealed, potentially overturned. Derek's heart stopped. "She could get me out?" "She could reduce your sentence significantly, from 8 years to 18 months. "Why?" Derek's voice cracked. "After everything, why would she help me?" Harold removed his glasses and met Derek's eyes directly. "Because she believes in consequences, not cruelty. You've lost your career, your reputation, your freedom. You've lost everything you built. In her view, the lesson has been taught." Derek grabbed the document with trembling hands. He scanned it quickly, looking for the catch. "What does she want in return?" "3 conditions." Harold held up one finger. "First, you sign a full confession admitting to the corporate espionage. This confession will be sealed, but can be released if you ever attempt to claim innocence publicly or write a book about your experience." "What else?" "Second, you forfeit any claim to the assets from your marriage.
The penthouse, the investments, everything you kept in the divorce, all of it reverts to Ms. Whitmore. Derek's jaw tightened. She wants to take back what she gave me? She wants to correct an imbalance. Harold held up a third finger. Third, and this is non-negotiable. Upon your release, you will work for Northwind Logistics. Derek blinked. Work for her? Entry-level position, warehouse operations. You'll load trucks, check inventory, sweep floors. Harold's voice was neutral. Minimum wage, 40 hours a week, for a period of no less than 2 years. That's insane. I was a vice president. You were many things, Mr. Sullivan. Now you have an opportunity to become something different. Harold stood. You have 48 hours to decide. Sign the agreement and your appeal begins immediately. Refuse and you serve your full sentence. He walked toward the door. Wait,
Derek's voice echoed in the empty room. Why? Why does she want me working in her warehouse? Is this some kind of revenge? Making me grovel? Harold paused. He turned back, and for a moment his expression softened. I asked her the same question. Do you know what she said? Derek shook his head. She said everyone deserves a second chance, but second chances must be earned, not given. Harold opened the door. She spent 3 years working in a bakery, Mr. Sullivan, earning minimum wage, living simply, and in those 3 years, she learned more about human nature than in all her years of privilege. She wants me to learn something? She wants you to have the opportunity to learn something. Whether you take it is up to you. Harold stepped through the door. 48 hours, Mr. Sullivan. Choose wisely. The door closed. Derek sat alone with the document. 18 months instead of 8 years. Freedom instead of concrete walls. A job instead of a cell. But it would mean admitting everything. It would mean losing everything. It would mean starting over from the absolute bottom. He thought about Caroline, the quiet woman who'd poured his coffee every morning, who'd listened to his complaints and soothed his frustrations and never asked for anything in return. He'd called her weak. He'd called her nothing. Now she was offering him mercy he didn't deserve. Derek picked up the pen. His hand hovered over the signature line. For the first time in his life, Derek Sullivan didn't know who he was. The pen touched paper. 3 weeks later, Caroline received word that Derek's appeal had been accepted. His sentence was reduced. His release date was set for 14 months away. She was in her office at Whitmore Holdings when Nathan Cross brought her the news. He signed everything, Nathan said. The confession, the asset forfeiture, the employment agreement, all of it. Caroline didn't look up from her laptop. Good, you seem disappointed. Not disappointed. She closed the laptop. Just thoughtful. About what? About whether I did the right thing. Caroline walked to the window. The New York skyline stretched before her, glittering with lights. Part of me wanted him to rot in that cell forever. Part of me wanted him to feel every ounce of pain he caused me. And now? Now I wonder if revenge was ever the point. She turned to face Nathan. My father used to say that destroying your enemies is easy. Anyone with enough money and power can crush someone beneath them. The real challenge is building something that outlasts the destruction. What are you building? Caroline smiled slightly. I'm not sure yet, but it started in that bakery. Serving coffee to strangers, learning their names, their stories, their struggles. I was happier there than I ever was in this office. So go back. I can't. Not the same way. Caroline returned to her desk. But I can make sure Rosie stays exactly as it is. A place where people can find work when they need it. Where they can rebuild when everything else has fallen apart.
Including Derek? Especially Derek. Caroline pulled up a file on her computer. He's going to hate every minute of it. The manual labor, the minimum wage, the complete loss of status. But if there's any chance he can become a decent person, that's where it'll happen. Nathan hesitated. Do you really believe he can change? I believe everyone can change. I'm living proof of that. Caroline met his eyes. The question is whether they choose to. The phone on her desk buzzed. Ms. Whitmore, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent. Who is it? A pause. She says her name is Madison Pierce. Caroline's expression didn't change. Send her up. Nathan raised an eyebrow. Do you want me to stay? No. This is something I need to handle alone. Nathan left.
2 minutes later, Madison Pierce walked into Caroline's office. She looked different than she had at the gala. No designer dress, no borrowed jewelry. She wore jeans and a simple white blouse, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. No makeup. She looked exhausted. Miss Whitmore? Madison's voice was hoarse. Thank you for seeing me. I didn't think you'd come. Neither did I. Madison stood in the center of the office, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. I've spent the last 6 months trying to find work. Any work. No one will hire me. My credit is destroyed. I got evicted from my apartment last month. Where are you staying? A shelter. In Brooklyn. Caroline studied her carefully. And you came here because you want me to fix it? No, Madison shook her head. I came here because I owe you an apology. Silence stretched between them. That day at the bakery, Madison continued, her voice breaking. I laughed at you. I called you a kicked puppy. I thought I was better than you because I was prettier, younger, dating a richer man. Tears streamed down her face. I was wrong. I was so wrong about everything. What changed your mind? Living on the other side, Madison wiped her eyes with her sleeve. For the first time in my life, people looked at me like I was worthless, like I didn't deserve to breathe the same air as them. I walked into restaurants where I used to eat, and they wouldn't even let me use the bathroom. That's how you made me feel, Caroline said quietly. That day in Rosie's. I know, and I'm sorry. Madison's voice dropped to a whisper. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I understand now. I understand what I did to you. Caroline was silent for a long moment. Then she stood and walked around her desk. Sit down, Madison. Madison hesitated, then sat in one of the leather chairs. Caroline sat across from her. 6 months ago, I told you to apply to Rosie's Bakery. You didn't. I thought you were mocking me. I wasn't. Caroline leaned forward. I was offering you the same thing that saved me. A chance to start over. To learn who you are when you have nothing. To discover that your value isn't determined by who you're dating or what you're wearing. Madison stared at her. You were serious? Completely. Caroline pulled a business card from her pocket. Rosie's is still hiring. Martha O'Brien runs the place. She's tough, but fair. If you show up, work hard, and treat people with respect, she'll give you a chance. Madison took the card with trembling fingers. Why? She asked. After everything I did, why would you help me? Because someone helped me once. Caroline's voice softened. I was 22 years old. My father had just died. I was drowning in money and expectations, and people who only wanted what I could give them. I ran away from all of it, changed my name, found a job at a bakery, And for the first time in my life, I felt free. What happened? I met Derek. Caroline smiled sadly. I thought he was different. I thought he loved me for who I was, not what I had. I was wrong. But I don't regret those years. They taught me what matters. And they taught me that everyone deserves a second chance. Madison clutched the business card like a lifeline. I don't know if I can do it, she admitted. Work for minimum wage? Start at the bottom? I've never had to actually earn anything before. Then you'll learn. Caroline stood. And if you fall down, you'll get back up. That's how it works. That's how life works when you're not hiding behind someone else's success. Madison rose slowly. She looked at Caroline, really looked at her, for the first time. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. Caroline extended her hand. Good luck, Madison. I hope you find what you're looking for. Madison shook her hand. It was the first time anyone had touched her with kindness in 6 months. She walked out of Caroline's office, clutching a business card and something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The next morning, Martha O'Brien looked up from the bakery counter to see a young blonde woman standing nervously at the door. Can I help you? I'm here about the job. Madison's voice was small. The waitress position. Martha studied her, saw the circles under her eyes, the worn clothes, the desperate hope in her expression. You ever worked in food service before? No. You willing to learn? Yes. You willing to work hard, show up on time, and treat every customer like they matter? Yes. Madison's voice grew stronger. I am. Martha nodded slowly. There's an apron in the back. Put it on. Training starts now. Madison walked toward the back of the bakery. She passed the same table where Derek had humiliated Caroline 6 months ago. She paused, looking at it, remembering. Then she put on the apron and got to work. Across the city, in a prison cell, Derek Sullivan was reading a letter. It was the first letter he'd received in months. It wasn't from Caroline. It wasn't from a lawyer. It wasn't from anyone he knew. It was from Thomas Reeves, his public defender. Derek, I thought you should know something before your release. The evidence that convicted you, the emails, the recordings, the financial records, none of it came from Caroline Whitmore. It came from Madison Pierce. She went to the FBI 2 weeks after you were arrested. She gave them everything. Text messages, photos, details about your activities she'd gathered during your relationship. She traded the information for immunity from accessory charges. Ms. Whitmore's lawyers only provided documentation about the shipping contracts. The stuff that proved corporate espionage, the serious charges. All of it came from the woman you left your wife for. I thought you deserved to know the truth. Good luck with your appeal. Thomas Reeves. Derek stared at the letter. Madison. The woman he'd left Caroline for. The woman he'd showered with gifts and promises. The woman he'd called his future. She'd been the one to destroy him. Not Caroline. Madison. Derek folded the letter carefully. He thought about rage. He thought about revenge. He thought about everything he'd lost. Then he thought about Caroline. She'd had the power to destroy him completely. She'd had evidence, resources, and every reason to want him buried. Instead, she'd offered him mercy. She'd offered him a second chance. And the woman he'd chosen over her had stabbed him in the back without a moment's hesitation. Derek lay down on his cot and stared at the ceiling. For the first time since his arrest, he didn't feel anger. He felt something worse. He felt the full, crushing weight of his own stupidity. And somewhere deep inside, in a place he'd buried long ago,
Derek Sullivan began to wonder if he could ever become the kind of person who deserved a second chance. The kind of person Caroline had always believed he could be. 14 months passed. Derek Sullivan walked out of the federal detention center on a cold November morning. He carried one plastic bag containing the clothes he'd been arrested in. The suit that had once cost $3,000 hung loose on his frame. He'd lost 30 pounds. No one was waiting for him. No car, no family, no friends. He stood at the bus stop and waited for the transit that would take him to New Jersey, to Northwind Logistics, to the warehouse where he would spend the next 2 years of his life. The bus ride took 3 hours. Derek stared out the window the entire time, watching the city give way to industrial parks and shipping yards. Every mile took him further from the life he'd known. When he arrived at Northwind, a security guard checked his name against a list. Derek Sullivan, Warehouse Operations. Report to Building C. Ask for Marcus. Derek walked across the massive complex. Brand new semi-trucks, state-of-the-art loading equipment, hundreds of workers moving with precision. This was the worthless company he'd signed away in the divorce. This was the empire he'd handed to Caroline without a second thought. Marcus turned out to be a stocky man in his 50s, with forearms like tree trunks. He looked Derek up and down without expression. "You the executive?" "Former executive." "Here, you're a loader. 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week. You lift boxes, you stack pallets, you sweep floors. Any questions?" "No." "Good." Marcus handed him a uniform. Gray coveralls, steel-toed boots. "Lockers are in the back. Shift starts in 10 minutes. Don't be late." Derek changed in silence. When he emerged, Marcus was waiting with a clipboard. "One more thing." Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping low. "I know who you are. Everyone here knows who you are. The guy who humiliated the boss's ex-wife in some bakery. The guy who tried to sell company secrets." Derek said nothing. "Ms. Whitmore gave you a second chance. Most of us here got second chances too. Ex-cons, addicts in recovery, people the world threw away." Marcus jabbed a finger into Derek's chest. "You disrespect anyone in this building. You slack off. You act like you're better than the rest of us. And I will personally make sure your parole gets revoked. Understood?" "Understood." "Good. Now get to work." Derek's first day was the hardest physical labor of his life. He lifted boxes until his arms screamed. He stacked pallets until his back felt like it was breaking. He swept concrete floors until his hands blistered. By the end of his 12-hour shift, he could barely walk. He took the bus to a halfway house in Newark. His room was 8 feet by 8 feet, a single bed, a small desk, a window that looked out onto a brick wall. He lay down and stared at the ceiling. Every muscle in his body ached. He thought about the penthouse on Fifth Avenue, the silk sheets, the million-dollar views. Then he thought about Caroline. She had done this, working for minimum wage, living simply, serving customers who looked down on her. For 3 years, by choice. Derek closed his eyes. He had done it for 1 day, and he was ready to collapse. The first month was brutal. Derek's coworkers avoided him. They knew his story. They'd seen the news coverage, the court documents, the public humiliation. To them, he was the enemy. A rich man who'd gotten caught and was now being punished. He ate lunch alone. He worked in silence. He went back to his room every night and collapsed into dreamless sleep. But slowly, things began to change. In the second month, a young worker named Isaiah got his hand caught in a conveyor belt. Derek was the closest person. Without thinking, he hit the emergency stop
and pulled Isaiah free before the machinery could do serious damage. Isaiah's hand was cut, but not crushed. "You saved my fingers," Isaiah said later, holding up his bandaged hand. "Why?" Derek didn't have an answer. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just saw you were in trouble." Isaiah studied him for a long moment. "Maybe you're not as bad as everyone says." It was the first real conversation Derek had in 60 days. In the third month, Marcus assigned Derek to inventory management. It was still manual labor, but it required organization, attention to detail, skills Derek actually possessed. "Don't get excited," Marcus warned. "You're still on the bottom. But Ms. Whitmore believes in matching people to their strengths." "Ms. Whitmore knows what I'm doing?" "She gets reports. On everyone." Marcus handed him a tablet. "Do a good job and maybe you'll move up. Eventually." Derek threw himself into the work. For the first time since his arrest, he felt something other than shame. He felt purpose. In the 6th month, Caroline visited Northwind. Derek was in the warehouse, checking serial numbers on a shipment of construction materials, when the entire facility went quiet. He looked up. Caroline walked through the loading bay, flanked by Nathan Cross and 2 assistants. She wore a navy blue suit. Her hair was shorter than he remembered. She moved with the confidence of someone who owned everything she touched. Because she did. Their eyes met across the warehouse floor. Derek froze. Caroline held his gaze for exactly 3 seconds. Then she looked away and continued walking, listening to Nathan explain something about shipping schedules. She didn't stop. She didn't speak to him. She didn't acknowledge him beyond that brief moment of eye contact. But Derek understood. She was watching. She was waiting. She was giving him the chance to prove himself. The question was whether he would take it. In the 9th month, Derek's mother came to visit. Helen Sullivan was 72 years old. She'd stopped answering his calls after the conviction. She'd sent back his letters unopened. She'd told relatives that her son was dead to her. Now she sat across from him in the halfway house common room, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "You look thin," she said. "Manual labor will do that." "Your father would be ashamed." Derek flinched. His father had died 5 years ago, just as Derek was climbing the corporate ladder. He'd been proud of his son's success, bragged about him to everyone at the retirement community. "Dad would be ashamed of a lot of things," Derek said quietly. "So am I." Helen's expression softened slightly. "I saw you on the news. The trial, the sentencing. I couldn't believe my son had become that person." "Neither could I." "What happened to you, Derek? You were such a sweet boy. You used to bring me flowers on Mother's Day. You used to help your neighbors carry groceries." "I don't know." Derek stared at his hands, calloused now, rough from work. "I got promoted, started making real money, and somewhere along the way, I started believing I was better than everyone else. That rules didn't apply to me, that people were just obstacles or opportunities. That's not an excuse." "I know." Derek met her eyes. "I'm not making excuses. I'm just trying to understand, to figure out where I went wrong so I don't go there again." Helen was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across and took his hand. "Your father used to say that a man's character is revealed in how he handles failure, not success." Her voice trembled. "I stopped talking to you because I was ashamed. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe this is who you were supposed to become." Derek squeezed her hand. "I'm trying, Mom. I'm really trying." "I know, sweetheart." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I know." It was the first time Derek had cried since the divorce. In the 12th month, Derek received a visitor he never expected. Madison Pierce.
She walked into the North Wind Administrative Building, wearing a simple dress and sensible shoes. Her hair was pulled back. Her face was free of makeup. She looked nothing like the glamorous woman who'd paraded into Rosie's bakery 2 years ago. She looked like someone who'd been through a war. Madison. Derek stood slowly. What are you doing here? I work at Rosie's now. Her voice was different, softer, humbled. I've been there for almost a year. I heard. I wanted to see you. Madison sat down across from him. I wanted to tell you something. If it's about the FBI testimony, I already know. Thomas Reeves sent me a letter. Madison flinched. I'm sorry. I was scared. I thought if I cooperated, they'd go easier on me. They gave you immunity. Yes, she stared at the floor. I traded your freedom for mine. I told myself I was doing the right thing, exposing a criminal. But the truth is, I was just saving myself. Derek was quiet for a moment. I'm not angry. Madison looked up. What? I'm not angry, he repeated. I did terrible things, Madison. I broke laws. I hurt people. I destroyed my marriage because I thought I deserved something better. He shook his head slowly. You testified against a guilty man. That's not betrayal. That's justice. How can you say that? I ruined your life. I ruined my life. Derek's voice was firm. You just helped speed up the consequences. And honestly, maybe that was the best thing that ever happened to me. Madison stared at him like she was seeing a stranger. You've changed. I'm trying to. Derek smiled slightly. Caroline gave me a chance. She didn't have to. After everything I did to her, she could have let me rot in prison for 8 years. Instead, she offered me a way out, a way to become someone different. She gave me a chance too. Madison's eyes filled with tears. I showed up at her office 6 months ago, broke, homeless, begging for help. And she handed me a business card and told me to go work at a bakery. Did you? I'm still there. Madison laughed softly. I make coffee. I wipe tables. I serve customers who look down on me. And for the first time in my life, I actually feel like I'm earning something. Derek nodded slowly. I know exactly what you mean. They sat in silence for a moment. Two people who'd once thought they were better than everyone else. Two people who'd been brought to their knees by the consequences of their own choices. Two people, slowly, painfully, learning what it meant to be human. I should go. Madison stood. Martha gets upset when I'm late for my shift. Madison. She paused at the door. Thank you, Derek said, for coming, for being honest, for giving me a chance to forgive you. Madison's lips trembled. Do you? Forgive me? Yes. Derek met her eyes. I hope someday you can forgive yourself, too. Madison nodded once, then walked out. Derek watched her go. He thought about Caroline, about the woman who'd built an empire out of the ashes of her broken marriage, who'd offered mercy to people who'd hurt her, who'd created a place where broken people could rebuild themselves. He'd spent 7 years married to her. He'd never known her at all. In the 18th month, Derek completed his mandatory employment at Northwind. Marcus called him into the office on his last day. You're done. 2 years of service, completed as agreed. Derek nodded. Thank you. For everything. Don't thank me. Marcus leaned back in his chair. You did the work. You earned the respect of your coworkers. You kept your head down and your mouth shut and proved that you're not the same man who walked in here 2 years ago. I'm not sure what I am anymore.
That's the first step to becoming something better. Marcus handed him an envelope. This is from Ms. Whitmore. Derek opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten. Derek, I never believed you were beyond redemption. I believed you were worth saving, even when you didn't believe it yourself. The man who walked into Northwind 2 years ago was broken. The man walking out today is different. I can see it in the reports. I can see it in the way your coworkers speak about you. I can see it in the choices you've made. I don't know what comes next for you. That's your decision now. But I want you to know something. I forgive you. Not because you earned it, not because you deserved it, but because holding on to anger was destroying me, and I refuse to let you have that power over me anymore. Go build a good life, Derek. That's the only thing I ask in return. Caroline. Derek read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. What are you going to do now? Marcus asked. Derek thought about the question. He had no money, no connections, no reputation. He was starting from absolute zero at 42 years old. But he was free, truly free, for the first time in his life. I'm going to get a cup of coffee, Derek said, at a bakery I know. He took the bus to Manhattan. He walked into Rosie's bakery just as the lunch rush was winding down. Martha O'Brien looked up from the counter. Her eyes narrowed. Can I help you? I'm looking for work. Derek's voice was steady. I heard you might be hiring. Martha studied him. She saw the worn clothes, the calloused hands, the humility in his eyes. You ever worked in food service before? No. You willing to learn? Yes. You willing to work hard, show up on time, and treat every customer like they matter? Yes, Derek smiled slightly. I am. Martha nodded slowly. There's an apron in the back. Put it on. Training starts now. Derek walked toward the back of the bakery. He passed the same table where he'd humiliated Caroline 2 years ago. He paused, looking at it, remembering the man he'd been, the cruelty he'd shown, the arrogance that had consumed him. That man was gone. In his place stood someone new, someone humbled, someone still learning who he could become. Derek put on the apron and got to work. 3 months later, Caroline walked into Rosie's bakery on a quiet Thursday afternoon. She hadn't been back since the divorce. Too many memories. Too much pain. But Martha had called her that morning. There's something you need to see, Martha had said. Trust me. Caroline pushed open the door. The bell chimed softly. She stopped. Behind the counter, wearing a stained apron and a genuine smile, stood Derek Sullivan. He was taking an order from an elderly woman, patiently writing down her complicated coffee request, thanking her for her patience, promising her pie would be out in just a moment. He looked up. Their eyes met. Derek's expression didn't change. He didn't grovel. He didn't beg. He simply nodded once, a small acknowledgement, then returned his attention to his customer. Caroline walked to the counter. What can I get you? Derek asked. His voice was calm, professional, changed. Just coffee, black. Derek poured the cup and set it on the counter. Their fingers brushed briefly as she took it. Thank you, Caroline said. Thank you, Derek replied. For everything. Caroline took her coffee to a corner booth. The same booth where she'd sat during her own shifts, refilling cups and dreaming of a different life. She watched Derek work. He moved with quiet efficiency. He remembered regular customers' names. He cleaned tables without being asked. He treated everyone with the same respect, regardless of how they treated him. He was learning, just like she had learned. Martha slid into the booth across from her.
He showed up 3 months ago, asked for a job. I almost threw him out.
Why didn't you?
Because you taught me that everyone deserves a second chance. Martha smiled. Even the ones who hurt us the most.
Caroline sipped her coffee.
He's good at this. Better than good. The customers love him. He remembers their orders, asks about their families, actually listens when they talk.
Martha shook her head.
Hard to believe he's the same man.
He's not. Caroline watched Derek hand a slice of pie to a young mother struggling with a crying baby. He smiled at her, said something that made her laugh, then discreetly comped the dessert when she wasn't looking.
That man died a long time ago.
What about you? Martha asked gently.
Have you found what you were looking for?
Caroline thought about the question.
She had an empire now, billions of dollars, influence that reached across continents, power that most people couldn't imagine. But sitting here, in this small bakery, watching broken people rebuild their lives, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. "I think I'm getting closer," Caroline said. The bell above the door chimed. Madison walked in, tying her apron as she rushed toward the counter. "Sorry I'm late, Martha. The subway was—" She stopped when she saw Caroline. "Oh, hi."
"Hi, Madison." Madison glanced at Derek, then back at Caroline. Two people who'd hurt her, working side by side, learning, growing, changing.
This is weird, right? Madison said. All of us in the same room?
Very weird, Derek agreed. Caroline laughed softly. Life is weird. People change. Sometimes for the worse. Sometimes for the better. She stood and gathered her purse. The point is to keep trying, keep learning, keep becoming the person you were meant to be. She walked toward the door, then paused.
Derek.
He looked up. The help wanted sign. Caroline pointed to the window.
You might want to take it down. I think you found what you were looking for.
Derek smiled. A real smile. The first one she'd seen from him in years. Thank you, Caroline, for believing I could be different.
I believed in the possibility.
Caroline opened the door.
You did the rest.
She walked out into the sunshine. Behind her, Derek turned to Madison. Ready for the dinner rush? Always. Madison grabbed a coffee pot. Table 4 needs a refill. On it. They worked side by side, two people who'd once been enemies, now colleagues in the simple business of serving others. And in the corner booth, Martha O'Brien watched them with tears in her eyes. Broken things could be mended. Lost people could be found. And sometimes, the greatest revenge wasn't destroying your enemies. It was turning them into better people. 1 year later, Carolyn stood on the steps of Rosie's Bakery. The sign above the door had been updated. Rosie's Bakery, a Whitmore community kitchen. Below it, a smaller sign read, Everyone deserves a second chance. She'd bought the entire block, turned the upstairs into affordable housing for people rebuilding their lives, created a job training program that had helped hundreds of former inmates, addicts, and homeless individuals find stable employment. Derek managed the program now. He worked 12-hour days, mentoring new employees, sharing his story, proving that rock bottom wasn't the end. Madison ran the bakery itself. She'd earned Martha's trust and eventually her retirement. She trained new workers with the same patience Martha had shown her. And Carolyn? Carolyn had found something more valuable than all her billions. She'd found purpose. The door opened behind her. Derek stepped out, holding 2 cups of coffee. Thought you might want this. He handed her one. It's on the house. Thank you. Caroline took a sip. Perfect. How's the new class doing? Good. We've got a former accountant who embezzled from his firm, a recovering addict who lost custody of her kids, and a guy who spent 10 years in prison for armed robbery. They're scared. They're ashamed. They're exactly where I was 3 years ago.
And what do you tell them?
Derek looked out at the city. The same city that had celebrated his success, witnessed his downfall, and now watched his redemption. I tell them the truth, that they made terrible choices, that they hurt people, that they can never undo the damage they caused. He turned to Caroline. But I also tell them that they're not defined by their worst moments, that every day is a chance to become someone different, someone better.
Do they believe you?
Some of them, not all. Derek smiled sadly. But that's okay. Believing in yourself is the hardest part. It takes time. Caroline nodded. I should go. Board meeting in an hour. Running an empire. Building one. She started down the steps, then stopped.
Derek.
Yes?
I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you changed. I'm glad...
She paused, searching for the right words.
I'm glad the man I married finally became the man I always hoped you could be.
Derek's eyes glistened. I'm sorry it took me so long.
Some lessons take longer than others,
Caroline smiled.
The important thing is that you learned.
She walked away, disappearing into the crowded streets of Manhattan. Derek watched her go. Then he turned and walked back into the bakery. Back to his work. Back to his purpose. Back to the life he'd almost thrown away. The bell above the door chimed softly. Inside, Madison was training a new employee, a young woman who'd just gotten out of rehab. She was nervous, her hands shaking as she tried to work the espresso machine.
It's okay, Madison said gently. Everyone spills their first cup.
I ruined about 100 before I got the hang of it.
Really? Really. The trick is to keep trying. Eventually, your hands stop shaking. Eventually, it becomes second nature. Eventually, you realize that you're not the person you used to be. The young woman nodded, wiping tears from her eyes.
Thank you for giving me a chance.
That's what we do here, Madison smiled. We give people chances. Derek poured himself a cup of coffee and sat in the corner booth. The same booth where Caroline had sat on her last visit. The same booth where so many broken people had found their first moment of peace. He thought about everything he'd lost. The penthouse, the cars, the prestigious title, the woman who'd loved him when he had nothing. He thought about everything he'd gained: purpose, humility, forgiveness, the chance to help others avoid his mistakes. He thought about Caroline, the quiet waitress who turned out to be a billionaire, the scorned wife who destroyed him without ever raising her voice, the extraordinary woman who'd offered him redemption when he deserved only punishment. He'd spent 7 years married to her. He'd never truly seen her until she was gone. But that was the lesson, wasn't it? You never really know someone's worth until you've lost them. You never truly appreciate what you have until it's been taken away. You never understand your own capacity for change until you've hit rock bottom and started climbing back up. Derek finished his coffee. He washed the cup, dried it, and put it back on the shelf. Then he walked to the Help Wanted sign in the window. The same sign that had been there when Caroline worked here. The same sign that had been there when he first walked in, begging for a job. He took it down. Tomorrow there would be new people, new stories, new chances for redemption. But today, in this moment, the bakery was full. The staff was trained. The community was growing. And Derek Sullivan, the man who'd once mocked a waitress for serving coffee, finally understood what she'd known all along. True power isn't measured in money or titles or corner offices. True power is measured in the lives you change, the second chances you give, the person you become when no one is watching. Carolyn Whitmore had known that from the beginning. Derek Sullivan had taken 42 years to learn it. But he'd learned it. And that made all the difference. The sun set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. Inside Rosie's bakery, the dinner rush was just beginning. Madison took orders with a smile. The new employee successfully made her first perfect espresso. Derek welcomed a nervous young man who'd just been released from prison, shook his hand, and told him the same thing Martha had once told him. "There's an apron in the back. Put it on. Training starts now." The young man's eyes filled with hope. "Thank you. I won't let you down."
"I know you won't," Derek smiled. "None of us do. Not anymore." The bell above the door chimed as new customers entered. The coffee pot made its familiar gurgling sound. The smell of fresh pie filled the air. And in the heart of Manhattan, in a small bakery that had witnessed betrayal and redemption, broken people continued to find their way home. Because everyone deserves a second chance. And some people actually take it.